Hi, I'm Troy from Studio 33 Guitar, and welcome to the brand new beginner guitar series. If you're brand new to guitar, maybe you just bought one, or maybe you had one in a closet for years that you've pulled out and you're trying to learn how to play, and these lessons are for you. I'm going to start at the absolute very beginning, but I am going to skim over some things fairly quickly so that we don't get too bogged down with theory and that we can get you playing your first song as quickly as possible. If you'd like to take a look at some more in-depth lessons and maybe some more theory, you can go to our website, studio33guitar.com. We have full courses on there that'll take you through step by step on how to play guitar. But let's jump right in to your first lesson. The first thing obviously you need is a guitar. You don't need anything special. They're all basically the same. As you get a little bit better, you might want to invest in a better quality guitar. But for now, you can learn the basic mechanics and theory behind how to play on any instrument. Let's do a quick overview of the parts of the guitar and what they're named so that when I'm talking about them, you'll understand what I'm referring to. This main part of the guitar here is the guitar body. This is the guitar neck. Up here is the headstock, and that's where we tune the guitar. Now on the body of the guitar, we have this section back here, which is called the bridge. That's where the strings attach. And then this hole that's here is cleverly named the sound hole, and that's where the sound of the guitar comes out. On the neck of the guitar, we have these metal strips going up and down, and those are called frets. Now, when we talk about the frets on the guitar, and I tell you to put your finger on the first fret or second fret, I'm not talking about putting your finger directly on the metal bar. I'm talking about the space in between these frets. So this would be fret number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. The different strings that we have on the guitar are each tuned to a specific note. So when you play a string without putting your finger on any of the frets, for example like that, this thickest string produces an E note. And each string will produce a different note. So the next string down is called the A string because it produces an A note. The next one is a D. The next one, G. And then B. And then E. There's a few different ways that you can remember what the names of each of these strings are, but typically I will teach people to memorize a little saying to help you. And the letter of each word would correspond to the name of each string. So one of the sayings you can use is, Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Another one you can use is, eat all day, get big easily. There's a few other sayings out there, or you can make up your own to help you learn these names. It's important to know the names of the strings and the notes that they produce because you need to be able to tune your guitar to those notes. If your guitar is not in tune, it won't matter how good of a job you're doing of playing, it's not going to sound good. If you don't know how to tune the guitar, I do have a video that I'll put the link in the description that you can go to and check out how to tune a guitar. But you could also take the guitar to the local music store and have them tune it for you. And while you're at the guitar store, you're going to want to purchase a guitar tuner. And there's a lot of different types. Some of them look something like this that you hold in front of you, and it has a microphone that picks up the sound. Or there's this style which clips on to the end of the guitar. There's lots of different styles of tuners available. You can even download a tuner app on your phone. But regardless of what method you choose to tune it, it's very important to have your guitar in tune. Now we'll talk a little bit about posture. When you have the guitar, you just want to sit it on your leg. Where this little curve is here is designed to fit right on your leg. Now if you're a right-handed player, it would look just like this. If you're left-handed, obviously it would go the other way and you'd be on your left leg. You may have seen people play guitar with the guitar sitting on the other side like this. Now that's more for playing a classical style guitar, which is not what we're doing. So this is the way that you want to sit with the guitar. Now you want to bring your arm around and just rest this back part of your elbow against the top part of the guitar here. And then just let your arm come down naturally. You also want to make sure that you're sitting up straight You don't want to be slouched over. Try and sit up straight, and also have the guitar sitting straight up and down. A lot of times beginners want to bring the guitar back like this so that they can see where their fingers are going a little bit easier. But you want to resist that temptation. You want to make sure that that guitar stays upright like this so that you're not forming any bad habits that you'll have to correct later. But once you get that into a position where it's straight up and down and your elbow is just resting on the guitar, you should be able to sit like this, and it should sit balanced. So you shouldn't be trying to hold the guitar up with this hand. This hand should only be concentrating on playing these notes. The other thing you're going to want to pick up while you're at the music store is some guitar picks. Now there are countless different types of guitar picks made out of different materials and different thicknesses. A lot of the difference between guitar picks is just simply personal preference. But if you're a beginner, it's best to go with a thinner pick. Now typically for acoustic guitar, you're going to want to have a thinner pick than if you were playing electric guitar anyway. But for a beginner, you're going to want to have something that's a little bit thinner. It's going to have more flex to it, and it's going to be a little bit easier to play and a little bit more forgiving with your strum. If you go with something a little bit thicker, it's going to be more difficult to play. So this one that I have here is a 0.73 millimeter pick, and that's a good medium type of pick that is great for beginners, and it's what I use most of the time now for acoustic guitar as well. So I would suggest picking up a couple of these, 0.73, and also a little bit lighter, so maybe a 0.60, somewhere in that range. It'll be a little bit thinner, and you might find that a little bit easier to handle. So the next thing we need to cover is, how do we hold this pick? I find a good analogy to think of when you're trying to figure out how to hold a pick is to imagine that you're taking a key and opening up a lock. So you're unlocking the front door of your house with a key. And the way that your wrist turns and the way that your fingers come together is basically how you want to hold a guitar pick. It's almost like making an OK sign, but our finger and thumb are going to overlap a little bit more. So imagine that you've got that key and you're turning it. Now just take that pick and put it in between your finger and thumb. The main thing is you want this pointy end of the pick to be coming out from the side of your thumb. You don't want to be holding the pick like this, where the pick is coming out the end of the thumb. You want that to be turned so that it's facing and pointing out from the side of the thumb. And you don't want to grip the guitar pick too tightly. You want to have just enough pressure on there to keep from dropping it, but you don't want to be squeezing it too hard. So there's a couple of important aspects to think about when you're strumming the strings. One of the main things is we're going to keep our arm fairly straight, and we're going to be making the motion from our elbow here. So it's going to be like that. So we don't want it to be all wrist. There is going to be some wrist in there, and as you get a little bit more experience playing, you'll probably incorporate a little bit more wrist movement. But for now, we just want to use the arm going up and down like this. And you really want to think about the guitar pick gliding over the strings. You might want to imagine that the guitar pick is a paintbrush and that you're just putting some paint on the wall. So you're just gliding that pick over the strings. So you don't want to stab at the strings really hard. You just want to be able to glide through. So let's try that without worrying about our left hand and what it's doing on the neck. Just keep the strings open. It's not going to sound great, but just to get you used to strumming the pick across the strings. Now for now, let's not worry about doing upstrokes. Let's just worry about going down. So that would be something like this. And you can also try it with your hand just lightly resting on the strings. You're not pushing down at all, you're just holding them so they're not really making a sound. Now it's really common for beginners when they're strumming to kind of strum away from the guitar, like this sort of a motion, and you don't want to do that because that's going to cause you to miss some of these high strings. So what you want to do when that pick comes down over the strings is to actually have the pick come into contact with the guitar right here. So this part of the guitar is called a pick guard, and most guitars have them, and that's exactly what it's for. You're not going to damage your guitar at all. The pick can come down and actually hit that pick guard and not cause any problems. Now I recommend doing that for now. Again, after a while, you're not going to consciously think about that, but right now you really want to focus on having that pick come across the strings and literally landing on the guitar body. Now let's look at the left hand. As I mentioned earlier, when I'm talking about the frets of the guitar, I'm talking about the space in between these frets. So when we talk about the first fret, I'm talking about the space in between. Now when you play a note with your finger, you want that finger to be as close to that fret as you can. So you don't want it to be on top of the fret, but you want it to be pretty close. So you're not going to have to push as hard when your finger is close to the fret as you would if it was back here. So that's a really important part. It's going to make your note sound a lot cleaner. I'll demonstrate the difference in sound. If I play this note back here, I get that buzzing sound. And what that is the string actually buzzing against that fret, and that's how you get that buzzing sound. So if I move my finger forward, you can see how that note becomes a lot more clear as I've gotten really close to that fret. Because now the string is coming into contact with that fret and it's not buzzing and vibrating against it. So with all of our fingering that we do, we want to make sure that that finger is as close to the fret as we can. So when we play a full chord, we're going to want to try and get those fingers as close to the fret as we can. Now it won't always be possible because you'll have some fingers that'll be crowding out the other fingers, but that's the general rule that you want to think about when you're fretting a note, is you want that finger to be as close to the fret as you can get. Another really important part here is how we are gripping the neck. We don't want to grip it like we're holding a baseball bat with our thumb wrapped around like this. Now later on as you're playing, sometimes the thumb may come over and you may actually be able to use it to fret certain notes. Some people are able to do that. It's never really worked out very well for me because my fingers aren't that long, but if you've got larger hands especially, then that could actually become something that's an advantage to you, is to be able to reach around with the thumb. But for the most part, you want to keep your thumb down, back behind the neck, and situated just roughly above the middle of the neck. Now there's certain chords that we're going to play that your thumb will naturally have to come up over top of the neck, or at least kind of peek out from the top like this. And there's other styles of playing too that, as you get more experience, if you're playing electric guitar and so on, and you're doing string bending and that type of thing, where you'll bring your thumb up over top to get a little bit more strength. But for now, we're going to try and keep that thumb down close to the middle of the neck. And we also really want to try and play with the fingertips and not have our fingers lay too flat, because they'll come into contact with the other strings and prevent them from ringing out. So you want to make sure that your fingers are playing with the fingertips on the string and that you've got a good curl around to your fingers. So in order to get that, you may need to make some adjustments with your wrist. You might need to push it out a little bit more, or you may need to change your elbow. And that shouldn't be something that's super uncomfortable. It shouldn't cause you to contort your body a certain way. You shouldn't have to throw your elbow way out or turn your wrist way in. Your arm should fit fairly naturally on the guitar neck. If you put your arm down on your lap and you just raise your hand, it should be in roughly the right position. But you may need to make just some minor adjustments in order to make sure that you're getting your fingertips on the strings. Now let's look at how to play your first chord. So a chord in music is just simply a group of notes played together. Certain notes will sound better than other notes. So let's take a look at how to play your first chord. This first chord that we're going to play is going to be a very simplified version of an E chord. So we're going to take our index finger and we're going to put it on the first fret of this G string. So that string is going to be the third one up from the bottom. And again, we want to make sure that our finger is close to that fret and that we're playing with our finger tips. So we're going to play just these highest 3 strings. So if your finger is laying too flat, you're going to get that sound. So again, just make sure you just move your wrist maybe forward a little bit so you get all 3 of those notes coming out. Now, like I said, that's a simplified version of an E chord. Later on, we'll get to a full E chord, which will look something like that. But for now, you just want to get used to holding down the strings with your fingers. And now we're going to try a simplified version of an A chord. And all we're going to do for that is just move that index finger on the same string and move it up 1 fret. And we're going to play those same 3 strings. And that is a simplified version of an A chord. So those 2 chords actually sound really nice going back and forth between the 2, and that's what I would recommend you do next. You play this E, and then try the A. Now I'm strumming those up here with my hand just so you can see it on the camera, but really we should be back here. So that would look like this. Once you get a little bit more comfortable with that, then you can try strumming a little bit quicker. Now we're going to add another string and a couple more fingers. Let's take a look. We're going to build on that idea that we just had. So that index finger is going to go in that same spot that we just had it. And now we're going to add our middle finger to the next string up and then 1 fret higher. So we're moving from fret 1 to fret 2. So index finger's there, middle finger's there, and now we're going to be playing these 4 highest strings. Now again, that's an E chord. It is just, again, a simplified version of it. And now we're going to make this into another A chord. Earlier what we did is move this finger up 1 fret. Now we're going to do the same idea, but instead of moving that index finger up, we're going to use our ring finger to play that note. So it's the same note that we were just doing with our index finger, but now we're going to use our ring finger. And we're going to leave that middle finger on that new note that we just introduced. So that's going to look like this. Here's that E chord. And then we're just going to leave these 2 guys right where they are, and we're just going to add this ring finger, and we get that. Back to the first one. Ring finger down. So technically, once we put that ring finger down, the index finger is not really doing anything anymore as far as the note is concerned, but it's a good anchor position for us so that we can just leave that where it is and not have to lift it off and put our fingers back down. So now we're going to practice switching from one chord to another, and what we're going to do is play each chord 4 times. Now the reason that we're using the number 4 is typically that's how we would count music. So the beat of the music is when you listen to a song and you kind of tap your foot or nod your head, that's the beat of the music. And typically those beats are happening in groups of 4. So we would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would keep going. So for this exercise, what we're going to do is play each of these chords in a group of 4. Now you can decide what the beat is or what the tempo is and start slowly, and then eventually you can get a little bit quicker. But that's going to look something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then put our ring finger down. 1, 2, 3, 4. And take that ring finger off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put the ring finger down. 1, 2, 3, 4. The really important thing that you want to work on here is making that change from one chord to the other without stopping in between. So in the beginning, it's very natural for you to play 1, 2, 3, 4, and then stop, move your finger, and then start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. But what you want to get to is be able to make that change without changing the beat. So that continues. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That just keeps on going. Because if you're playing an actual song, that's how it needs to sound. You're not going to be able to have time to play 4 times and then take a break, switch your fingers, and then carry on. So what you really want to do is try and get this arm with that strum, keep going in that same tempo. So like we were talking about before, tapping your foot in time, you want your arm to be doing that. That's going to take a little bit of time, but eventually what you want is it to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to take those chords one step further so that you'll be able to strum all 6 strings. If we go back to this E chord shape that we had, now we're going to make a couple of changes. We're going to move our middle finger up 1 string. And then we're going to put our ring finger directly below it. So then we end up with this shape. So that's our middle finger on the 2nd fret, our ring finger on the 2nd fret, the next string down, and then our index finger back where it was before. So our ring finger now is where our middle finger was. And now we can play all 6 strings, and that's going to give us a full E major chord. And now what we're going to do to play that A chord is we're going to, again, leave that index finger right where it is. We're not going to lift it off the neck. But we're going to move our middle finger and ring finger, both of them, down to the next strings. And that's what we call an A2 chord. So for that chord, we're not going to play this low E string that we have. For the E chord, we are going to play all 6 strings. For the A chord, we're only going to play these 5 strings. The reason for that is because this is an E chord, and this is the E string. When we go to the A chord, we're playing the lowest note is the A string. So now we want to practice switching back and forth between those 2 chords. So we would count it the same way in groups of 4. And that would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a couple of really important things to think about when you're switching from one chord to the other. One is you want to make sure that you don't lift your fingers off too far on the neck, because that's just going to take you more time to come back down. So you want to make that movement as small as possible. So stay as low and as close to the strings as you can when you make that change. Also, when we're moving from that E chord to the A chord and back, we want to try and move these 2 fingers together at the same time. We don't want to move one finger and then the other one down. We want to try and move them together. Imagine that those 2 fingers are taped together and they have to move in that same shape. So another good thing to practice is don't even worry about your strumming hand for now. Just practice switching your fingers back and forth. And just work on getting those fingers to work together and move together. And move in the smallest amount of distance that you possibly can. There's a lot of different songs you can play with just those 2 chords, but I would also encourage you just to play around with them yourself and try different timings with when you make the chord changes. You don't have to necessarily play 4 beats on each chord. You can play 2 and then switch to the other, or you can play 3 or 6. You can mess around with it and come up with some interesting sounding things. Here's a couple of examples that you can do. That's it for this lesson, but that should give you lots to work on. Make sure you tune in for lesson number 2.